everyone, I'm Erin Underwood, and today I'm interviewing nominees in the novel category of the 2022 Shirley Jackson Awards, which recognize outstanding achievement in literature of psychological suspense, horror, and the dark fantastic. As of the time of this recording, the winners of this year's Shirley Jackson Awards have not yet been announced, and we will be sure to add that information in the notes below. Now, I am excited to introduce co-authors Paul Gandersman and Peter Hall, whose novel, The Dead Friends Society, published by Encyclopocalypse Publications, was nominated this year for the 2022 Shirley Jackson Awards. Paul Gandersman and Peter Hall are a pair of filmmakers and authors in Austin, Texas, and I am delighted that they could join me here today. Paul, Peter, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much for having us.
Great. Awesome. So first off, I'm really excited about your book, and I would love to have you share with the viewers just a quick little summary of, what the book is and kind of what they can expect with it.
Yeah, it's an interesting blend of genres. It's a slasher set in a haunted house where the main characters are ghosts, which is a strange setup for something. But if you imagine the initial setup was, what if we opened a story at the end of a slasher movie as a final girl is running around the house discovering all of her dead friends, and then she herself is murdered and wakes up in the house. So it's about the ghosts of the slasher's victims trapped in the house, and then a new family moves in and they have to learn how to interact with the living and prevent the next massacre.
All right. I already love it. It's so funny because that is actually something that you almost never see, is what would the next scene be, or what would the next step be, and what would happen in that house, and who would actually want to go live in it afterwards. So, awesome. What would you say inspired this? Like, this is a really cool story idea. What made you kind of come up with this idea? What inspired it?
I think Peter and I have been working together for 12 years, something like that, and just producing, writing our own material, making short films, and that sort of thing. And we kind of grew up reading the same stuff, R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike and Stephen King, and just kind of really, really love horror, and especially kind of like teen horror and things like that. And stuff that we kind of feel like really nobody's kind of making anymore. 90s horror is like our bread and butter. And, we've worked on different projects that are kind of like that swirl around, in this kind of world. But as for the actual inception of the idea, Peter, that was you, and I don't remember how genius struck there.
I mean, the idea, the one that I sort of just ballparked of what if you started a slasher at the end of a slasher, right, was one of those ideas that I wrote down on a note card a decade ago, and then kind of forgot about until I was in the middle of obsessively playing the Friday the 13th game, which came out a couple years ago, which is a game that lets you play the final girls and guys and survivors fending off Jason Voorhees. And we were talking to a friend, and I was just like, man, I really want to make a slasher. I want to write a slasher. And he was like, you should write a slasher. And then I instantly flashed back to that note card. I was like, and I, pitched it to Paul. I was like, what about this? And we kind of just went from there.
So you guys are filmmakers. Was it weird to be like, hey, let's write a novel, or how did that come up?
So it started as a movie. So this so that conversation was, the idea was to make a movie, this story, a movie. And we wrote an entire screenplay, multiple drafts of it. And we're in development on that for a while, different stops and starts. And then March 2020 hit. And, and so any progress kind of just stopped. And by April 2020, we were kind of like, we need to be working on something. And didn't seem like a good idea to write another screenplay because we had no idea when movies would be,
Right.
getting back to normal. And so we just thought, well, let's try our hand at writing a novel where the written word is the finished product. And I think we just kind of brainstormed like, oh, should we write something original? And then we were just like, well, we love this story. Let's try adapting it. It feels like it would be a good on-ramp to like seeing how it works, because we really had no clue. It's funny hearing you introduce us as filmmakers and authors. Like the and authors part is new.
It's very new.
As of like November. So it's odd to me. And so, yeah, it was just kind of opportunity. And I think we spent like the next 9 months or something like that writing the first draft. And we had no idea if it was any good.
Yeah, it's a huge learning curve going from screenplays to prose, extended prose in particular, because screenplays are all about their brevity and the concision of language and building a visual blueprint. You don't have time to dive into internal monologues and perspectives and things like that. And so it was a curve to start to write that way and allow us the sort of like mental permission to, you can write more than just 2 sentences to explain something. And so getting over that initial hump was, we had to sort of shift into that gear. But then after that, it was great. And it expanded the material greatly. It obviously helped that we had a pretty elaborate blueprint of a beat sheet of what should happen and when. Though things did shift significantly particularly in the third act, so to speak, from the screenplay to the novel. Another benefit there was that on the page, we gave ourselves permission to write as big as we wanted to, whereas we're independent filmmakers, so we're always keeping budget in mind and knowing what we can or cannot do. And so the finale, which non-spoiler alert for anyone who's ever watched slashers before, you expect a bit of a bloodbath at the end, and there's a significant one in ours. And so writing that even bigger was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think we learned, again, like Peter said, when you're writing a screenplay, you're not supposed to kind of write anything you don't really see, right? You can't write, Erin's thinking about this right now. It needs to be kind of description, character moves here, character says that. And if you're not evoking that on the page, you need to pull it out of the actor. And so no actors here. So it all had to come out on the page. And so, to Peter's point, we learned so much about the characters by getting in their head. If we were to get to make this as a movie one day, I think we'd go back to the screenplay and just kind of rewrite it with everything we learned.
Yeah, we'd have to readapt the book.
Yeah.
But it's funny, most people do it the opposite. Like they write a book and they're like, this would be a great screenplay. I'm going to turn it into a screenplay. And then they try to do it from that direction. And honestly, whatever direction you go, I think there's a bit of a learning curve. But I sort of think it's harder if you're an author and you're used to being expansive to suddenly have to contract your descriptions, your dialogue, everything into, visual beats. So the fact that you were opposite, that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, I would agree. If we had started to write this book without the screenplay, I can't even necessarily imagine what it would be, because I think we would have allowed ourselves to spiral down, certain paths that we had naturally cut ourselves off of when we were doing the screenplay. So it is an interesting luxury to have what we did going into this. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that if we had started as novelists and then tried to adapt it, it takes a lot more effort to resist writing things.
Right.
It's a lot easier to go, okay, we can cut that off now.
Yeah. So in the writing process, was there, whether we're talking about the screen, I guess we're talking about the novel specifically here, but in the writing process, was there anything that really maybe surprised you? Like once you're committed to that novel and you're bringing the story out in text rather than images. Was there any like really cool or surprising moments where you're like, wow, this scene was amazing and I'm so glad we did it? Or, you know, wow, this scene nearly killed me and I don't know how we got through it. Was there anything that just kind of sticks with you afterwards during that process?
I have a thought.
I'll go first because we might end up talking about the same thing. Since we spend so much more time getting to know the characters in the novel, there's much more investment in them emotionally in their inner lives. And so their deaths, and even though our characters are ghosts, they can still die again in the afterlife. So there is a real risk of loss in it. And so I think that combined with writing some death scenes, they hit me harder writing them. I was like, oh no, I care so much about blank. Like now, whereas before it was maybe more of a, you know, moments might have had more of shock value. Whereas in a novel form, you get a bit more invested.
Yeah, I think, and mine is kind of related to that, which is that, you know, in a movie, you kind of, I mean, I guess you can if that's the style, but you can't really be just kind of flashback constantly. Whereas in fiction, we're really inside a character's head. And so we can, in the moment, reference something that happened in their past, something that led to this moment, and just kind of go back and forth constantly, which is a very normal thing in fiction. And so I think that the freedom to be able to do that led to us, again, better understanding those characters. And I'm just very thankful we went for it and had the opportunity to do it. And another nice thing about it that, you know, that we talk about is kind of, you know, the film industry is very tough to get stuff made. We have a lot of scripts that are just kind of like in a digital drawer, right? And so I think of stories as like, in a way, you're kind of cursed with them. You have an idea, and like until you can get it out into the world, it's like it has to live in your brain forever. And I'm thankful for this experience because we were able to like get the story out there, get it out of, you know, exercise ourselves of the story. Yeah.
So this was your first like novel writing experience. I know you guys did the films and all, but that's pretty impressive. You turned your script into a novel, and you get, like, right out the gate, you get nominated for a Shirley Jackson Novel Award. Like, that just doesn't happen. Like,
that was a huge surprise to us, a monumental surprise when our publisher sent us the note about getting nominated. I thought it was a joke. Like I was like, can you forward me the email so I can read the whole thing? Because
I thought it was a scam. I was like, where are they going to ask for money? Like, where's it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and to confirm your nomination, here's where you PayPal us or something like that.
Right.
Because he had mentioned to us a few months ago that he was like, oh, I'm going to submit you guys for consideration. I was like, okay, cool. But in my head, I was like, but that's for real books. Like, this is our first book. Like, nothing's going to happen. That's for real writers. And so when it came in, it was a huge shock. And I feel like for the first time in my life, I fully understand it's just an honor to be nominated sentiment. Like, it is an incredible honor. And the other books that we're with it's very, very humbling.
Yeah. It's an exciting thing. You in my opinion, you look at the list of honorees or nominees, and it's like an exceptional reading list. Like, you're going to be happy. Pick anything and you'll be happy. I do have a question, and let me know if I got this right. The people in the house who are ghosts, are they all teens? Did I hear that correctly? And the new living people are teens? Like, does this count as like a YA book?
It is. That was a very interesting aspect of this to learn the various gradients that publishers consider material. I think we settled on this would be considered upper YA. The characters are college aged. The ghosts are college aged. And then the new family that moves in is a teenage daughter. Those are sort of our main ensemble. So it is, if this were a movie, it would be R-rated. It is violent. People die. People curse. There is everything that you would expect from a slasher in it. But it is, as Paul was saying at the beginning, we are huge fans of 90s horror, of the screams of the world. And those aren't the most like hardcore. They're not Saw. They're not like, we don't get into that territory, but it is definitely, it's on that upper YA scale.
We didn't write it with an audience in mind. We just wrote it with like, what do we enjoy, sort of thing. And then our publisher said, we think that's upper YA. And we said, okay.
You know, that's the best way to write. Like if you were to start it out thinking, oh, look, our characters are all teens, let's write a YA, you would have ended with a different book. You know, you wrote the book that needed to be written. And I think that's probably why it came out so very well. So congrats on that.
I think our complete, thank you. I think our complete novice in this area, or noviceness, I don't even know what word I should be using right now.
You're a writer, Peter.
Naivete was an advantage in that we weren't thinking of any of those goalposts. We weren't thinking of like what guidelines, what publishers will be interested. It was purely just can we write a book? And then once it was done, we didn't even know what to do with it.
Yeah, it kind of sat as a file for like a year, like just because we realized we just didn't know what to do, and we're crazy. I tweeted. Peter and I were sitting down at South by Southwest about to watch a movie, and I was like, man, how have we done nothing with this book? How have we not gotten it out there? And I tweeted, does anybody know a publisher? And then the movie ended, and I opened my Twitter, and I got a DM.
Yeah,
that's awesome. What a great story. Yeah. I can't believe you let it sit for like a year. But guys, I'm loving this conversation. So the story sits for a year. When you get the DM, what do you do next? Do you go back through and like dust off the pages and then submit, or what happened?
I
think we sent the PDF we sent the PDF like right away, and because again, at that point it had been through revision on the screenplay, and then multiple revisions on the novel, and already gotten feedback from friends and stuff, and we just sent it, and the publisher, Sean at the publisher, got back to us within like 2 or 3 days and said he didn't know the backstory. He goes, "This book felt like I was watching a movie."
Yeah, you were.
That's great. Funny story.
And it's funny because we knew we hadn't even done like a proper copy edit on it at that point. The way that Paul and I write, we are sort of constantly editing as we write. But Sean came back and was like, oh, has this gone through an editor yet? And so we were expecting him to be like, because it's garbage and there's a lot to fix. And then we were like, oh no, we know it needs a copy edit, but he was like, no, I'm not even talking about like a copy editor. Like I assumed that it had gone through like a back and forth with an editor, but it hadn't. But I think part of that benefit is that Paul and I are constantly bouncing things back and forth amongst ourselves, that it benefits from that development process throughout.
Yeah, we call it a lawnmower method. If you've ever mowed a lawn before, you kind of go down a strip of it and then come back and you overlap the other strip. So Peter will write 10 pages. I go through his 10 pages. I make modifications, and then I add 10. Then he goes through my 10. And so by the time we get to the end of a draft of anything, our voices have kind of blended together, and I don't even know who wrote what at any point. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That sounds like a really nice writing process. And the fact that you've been working together so long, you've kind of got a system down, an understanding. That's, there are a lot of writing duos out there, or writing teams out there that don't have that. So good job, guys.
Thanks. It's fortunate.
Yeah, it's lucky. Yeah.
And also too, because like we very rarely get blocked, because one of us will just be like, I don't know how to write this part, I'm skipping it. and then the other person figures it out, and it
Yeah,
works out. It's a nice cheat code.
that really is. That is. So, guys, we are really close to time here, which makes me sad because I'm loving chatting with both of you. This is so much fun. I love movies, and I love horror, and I love horror novels. So, perfect conversation. So, before we go, though, I want to give you a chance to share with the audience kind of what you have coming up next. Do you have any projects in the works? Anything coming out soon? Anywhere you're going to be appearing soon? Anything like that?
Nothing in the works publishing wise right now. I mean, we're sort of shifting back to the film side, and so we have a film project that we can't say too much about right now, but fingers crossed will actually happen potentially later this year, which will be very exciting. It's a horror film. It's very much so Paul and I. It's a very different shift from the Dead Friends Society. It's a bit more serious, but we're very excited to do that. And then we would love to write a sequel to the Dead Friends Society if there's demand for it.
All right. Well, people, go out and buy that book and read it, and let the publisher know that you love it too. So, Paul, Peter, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation, and while I can't have favorites, good luck. I wish you the very best with the awards and with your future writing. I'm sure there's some good things in store.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for spotlighting small independent writers and publishers and doing what you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for watching. The 2022 Shirley Jackson Awards will be announced on July 15th at Readercon, the conference of imagination and literature. Jeff VanderMeer and Ann VanderMeer will be our ceremony hosts. As a reminder, the awards are run by volunteers, and as always, they're done on a shoestring budget. So they're happy to receive any donations that you may choose to make. And thank you in advance if you do so. Please visit shirleyjacksonawards.org for more information. Again, thank you for watching and supporting the Shirley Jackson Awards.